remember being 9 years old, standing in the kitchen at midnight, making my younger brother a sandwich because my mum had locked herself in her room again. I remember thinking very clearly, this is just what we do now, not with sadness, not with anger, just acceptance. Like I'd been given a job description I never applied for, and somewhere along the way I just started showing up for the shift. That's how it starts, you know. Not with a single catastrophic moment, but with a series of small disappearances. Yours. Where one day you're a kid and the next, without anyone officially telling you, you're not anymore. Maybe you're 6 years old, watching your dad drink himself into silence every night, and you learn that your laughter is too loud, your needs too heavy, your existence somehow an inconvenience. So you make yourself smaller, quieter. You become the child who doesn't ask for things, or maybe you're 10 and your parents are screaming at each other again, and your little sister is crying in the next room, and suddenly you're the one walking in there, smoothing her hair, whispering that everything's going to be okay, even though you have no idea if that's true, even though you're terrified too. But someone has to be the adult here, right? And clearly it's not going to be the adults. This is what psychologists call parentification, and if that word feels clinical, sterile, too clean for what actually happened to you, that's because it is. The lived experience of it is so much messier, so much more devastating than any textbook definition could capture. Dr. Gabor Maté, the physician who spent decades studying trauma and attachment, puts it like this: the greatest damage done by neglect, trauma, or emotional loss is not the immediate pain they inflict, but the long-term distortions they induce in the way a developing child will continue to interpret the world and her situation in it. Listen to that again. It's not just what happened, it's what you decided about yourself, about the world, about love, safety, worth, based on what happened. That's where the real damage lives, in the belief system you constructed when you were too young to know you were building a prison. See, when a child is forced to become the emotional caregiver, when they're put in charge of regulating not just their own feelings, but the feelings of the adults who are supposed to be taking care of them, something fundamental breaks. Not loudly, not obviously, but it breaks. The developmental psychologist Donald Winnicott talked about something he called the false self. It's the version of you that develops when your authentic self, the messy, needy, playful, sometimes difficult child, isn't safe to exist. So you create a performance, a version of yourself that's acceptable, manageable, the good child, the responsible one, the one who never causes problems because you've learned, maybe without anyone ever saying it explicitly, that problems equal rejection. That needs equal abandonment. That the only way to guarantee someone will stay is to make yourself indispensable. I used to do this thing, I don't know if you did it too, but I used to practice conversations in my head before having them. I'd run through every possible version of how the other person might react, anticipating their emotions, preparing responses that would keep everything calm, manageable, safe. I'd script entire interactions just to minimize the chance of conflict. I was 12 years old, walking around with the emotional hypervigilance of a hostage negotiator. That's what parentification does to your nervous system. It wires you for constant surveillance. You become fluent in reading micro-expressions, shifts in tone, the almost imperceptible signs that someone's mood is changing. Because when you're small and your safety depends on managing the emotional states of unstable adults, you get really good at reading rooms, at sensing danger, at making yourself whatever shape the moment requires. Bessel van der Kolk, one of the world's leading trauma researchers, wrote in, "The body keeps the score." Being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. But what happens when you never learned what safety feels like? When the people who were supposed to teach you about secure attachment were the ones you needed protection from? You grow up, that's what happens. You grow up into an adult who knows how to perform competence but not how to ask for help. Who knows how to be needed but not how to need. Who knows how to hold space for everyone else's pain but has no idea what to do with their own. I spent my entire 20s in relationships where I was the emotional manager, the one who could handle it. The therapist boyfriend who never broke down because I'd learned that falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford. And then I'd wonder, late at night, why I felt so lonely next to someone who supposedly loved me. It's because they didn't know me. How could they? I'd never shown her the parts of myself that weren't useful, the parts that were just human. This is what the psychiatrist Alice Miller meant when she wrote, "The true opposite of depression is not gaiety or absence of pain, but vitality, the freedom to experience spontaneous feelings. Parentified children don't get vitality. They get survival, and survival requires shutting down the spontaneous, the playful, the vulnerable, the real. You learn to exist in a state of constant management, of yourself, of others, of every situation. And here's the thing nobody tells you, that hyper-responsibility you developed, the world loves it, rewards it even. You become the reliable employee, the friend everyone calls in a crisis, the partner who never needs anything. People praise your independence, your strength, your maturity, and you smile and accept the compliments because what else are you going to say? Actually, I'm not mature, I'm just deeply traumatized and my nervous system has been stuck in survival mode since I was 7 years old. Yeah, that doesn't really come up in casual conversation. Carl Jung said something that's haunted me for years. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You want to know why that's so terrifying for people like us? Because accepting ourselves means accepting that we were abandoned, that we were children who needed protection and didn't get it, that the strength everyone admires isn't a virtue we chose, it's a scar tissue that's formed over a wound that never properly healed. Bowlby, the psychologist who pioneered attachment theory, spent his career studying what happens when a child's fundamental need for security isn't met. He found that children will do absolutely anything to maintain proximity to their caregivers, anything, even if it means abandoning themselves, even if it means becoming someone else entirely. Because for a child, aloneness equals death. So the choice isn't really a choice. It's biology, it's survival instinct. It's I will erase myself if that's what it takes to not be left. That's not weakness, that's not failure. That's a small, terrified, brilliant child doing the only thing they could do to stay alive. You saved yourself with the only tools you had. And if those tools were silence, hypervigilance, emotional caretaking, performance disappearance, that's not your fault. That's what you had to work with. But here's where it gets complicated. What saved you then is destroying you now, because you're not 7 anymore. You're not small and powerless and dependent on unstable people for survival. But your nervous system doesn't know that. It's still running the same program, still scanning for danger, still believing that your worth is conditional, that love is something you earn through usefulness, that rest is dangerous, that needing something makes you a burden. I had a moment a few years ago where I got really sick, like properly ill, couldn't get out of bed for a week sick. And I remember the panic that set in, not about being sick, about being useless, about not being able to take care of things, about people seeing me as weak, as needy, as a problem. I literally tried to respond to work emails from bed with a 103-degree fever because the idea of being unavailable, even when I was physically incapacitated, felt like a moral failure. That's when I realized I'm still that 9-year-old in the kitchen at midnight, convinced that my value is directly proportional to how little I ask for and how much I provide. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and wrote about meaning and suffering, observed, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But the paradox for parentified adults is that we became experts at changing ourselves. We've been doing it our whole lives, shape-shifting to meet everyone else's needs. The healing isn't about changing yourself again. It's about finally allowing yourself to just be, without performance, without utility, without having to earn your right to exist. So what does healing actually look like? Because I can tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like suddenly becoming a different person. It doesn't look like fixing yourself, because you wish you were never broken. Damaged, yes. Shaped by trauma, absolutely. But not fundamentally defective. It starts with witnessing, with turning toward the child you were and acknowledging what happened, not minimizing it, not comparing your pain to someone else's and deciding yours doesn't count, not telling yourself you turned out fine when you know deep in your bones that fine is just another mask you wear. It starts with saying out loud if you can, I was a child, and I was put in an impossible position, and I did the best I could, and it wasn't fair, and I didn't deserve it. Sit with that. I know it feels dramatic. I know it feels self-indulgent. I know every part of you wants to minimize, to rationalize, to explain why it wasn't that bad. That's the parentified child in you, still protecting the adults who failed you, still making excuses for them, still insisting that your pain doesn't matter as much as maintaining the fiction that your childhood was acceptable. But Dr. Alice Miller wrote, the truth about our childhood is stored up in our body. And although we can repress it, we can never alter it. Our intellects can be deceived, our feelings manipulated, and conceptions confused, but someday the body will present its bill. Your body knows, the insomnia knows, the hypervigilance knows, the chronic anxiety knows, the inability to rest knows. The body keeps the score, as van der Kolk says, and it's been keeping score since you were small. The healing work is brutal, I won't lie to you. It requires feeling things you've spent decades avoiding, anger at the people who should have protected you, grief for the childhood you never got to have, rage at having to be strong when you should have been allowed to be soft, sorrow for all the times you needed someone and no one came. It means asking your inner child, what did you need back then that you never got? And actually listening. Maybe they needed someone to notice they were struggling. Maybe they needed permission to be a kid, to be messy, loud, needy, imperfect. Maybe they needed someone to say, you don't have to take care of everyone. Someone's going to take care of you. And then, and this is the hardest part, you have to become that person. Not because it's fair, not because you should have to parent yourself, but because no one else is coming. The rescue you've been unconsciously waiting for, the fantasy that someone will finally see how much you're carrying and insist you put it down. It's not coming. You are the one who has to go back and retrieve that child. You are the one who has to say, I see you, I've got you. You can rest now. This is what Jung meant by shadow work. It's integrating all the parts you had to exile to survive. The needy part, the angry part, the part that wanted to scream, what about me? When does someone take care of me? The part that's been buried under years of performance and competence and relentless self-sufficiency. It's learning slowly and imperfectly that you can have needs and still be lovable, that you can set boundaries and people won't abandon you, and if they do, they were never safe people to begin with, that you can be unproductive, unavailable, even difficult sometimes, and still be worthy of love, care, and respect. I'm still learning this. Some days I'm better at it than others. Last week I cancelled plans because I was overwhelmed, and I didn't even make up an excuse, didn't perform apologetic, just said I need to be alone tonight, and the world didn't end. The person wasn't angry, and I got to rest. Actually rest. And it felt strange, foreign, but also somewhere deep underneath the discomfort. It felt like coming home. If you're someone who grew up too fast, who became the adult when you should have been the child, who learned that your needs were dangerous and your worth was conditional, I want you to know something. Your maturity was never the gift people told you it was. It was a survival mechanism, a scar, and you deserved better. But you're here now, and you have a choice. You can keep running the old program, overgiving, overfunctioning, overperforming, or you can start the painful, messy, necessary work of letting that child finally rest. You never had a childhood, but you still have a future, and this time you get to write it. Not as the caretaker, not as the one who holds everything together, but as a whole person, with needs, boundaries, limits, and the radical, terrifying, beautiful right to simply exist, without having to earn it, without having to justify it, without having to be useful, just existing as yourself. Finally, that child you were, they're still waiting. Go back and get them. Tell them what no one else did. You're safe now. You're allowed to be small. I'll take care of everything from here, and mean it.